Do you remember the first time you felt like you were really bombing on stage? Like, I think we
Yes.
probably bomb for you do? You do? Like
Yes.
specifically?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Really?
remember it very well. I remember almost every devastating bomb. Like
Yeah.
I can remember it physically.
Yeah, that feeling like I don't do you get like the sort of the feeling in the back of the neck kind of thing, like
I
clammy?
get like this sort of rising out of my body feeling, like
Yeah.
just leaving my body, not remembering anything that I've written before, and
Right.
kind of like the best way I can describe it is like if you've ever done mushrooms and you've had a bad trip, it's that feeling of uh-oh, here we
Yeah.
go. You know,
Yeah.
like that feeling of like it's going to be bad for a little while, and
Right.
it's not going to feel real, and it's not going to feel okay, and buckle up, you know?
Yeah. It's crazy that's a great point where you sort of say, "Uh-oh, it's going to be bad," where you
Mhm.
know it before it happens. Like
Yeah.
and you just have to watch this wave come at you and hit you, Nothing you can do
Yeah.
gets you out of the way.
Right. Well, it's also kind of like this feeling of like it's yeah, a wave is a really good analogy for it because if you've ever been in the ocean just kind of like playing around and then suddenly like a big wave comes and you're like, "Oh, this is going to be great."
Yeah.
And then suddenly like you've like thrown your whole neck out and you've just got sand in your fucking bathing suit. Like
Right.
it's like it gets dangerous real quick. Um, but yeah, that's a great analogy for it for sure.
What is the first time that do you remember where you were and how it went down the first time when you're like, yeah, this is about to get real bad?
Yeah, I remember I was well, there's two times that I can remember. The first time it was this feeling of it was just a bar show, but you know, I was brand new, so everything felt more important than it really was. It was the first show that I'd been booked on outside of just like barking for shows. So I made a big deal out of it. And I remember it was in Williamsburg, and my ex boyfriend at the time, we had just started dating. It was like maybe our second or third date, and he was a stand up, and he came because it was right underneath his apartment. And I didn't know that he was there. But I remember feeling like this is going really poorly. This is actually really not good. And is this what bombing feels like? It was like kind of like feeling my way around a new place because
Hmm.
you know, the shows that I had done before that, the jokes had done pretty well. But in this, or at least what I thought was well,
Right, right. Yeah.
and this was like a new experience for me. I was like, "Oh, I'm really being iced out. These people don't like me or they don't like what I'm doing." And I instinctually got off the stage and just went to the bathroom. Like, and this is like what I do whenever I've bombed so bad that I just seek shelter in
Hmm.
the closest area possible to me. So I'll just go and I think about it literally every bomb I've ever had. I just go directly into a bathroom and wait until I've stopped sweating.
Yeah.
And then I'll like go back out. But because it's so obvious on my face, like what has just happened,
You're
I
right,
can't
right.
hide it. So
People were like, "Did you run? Did you run here?"
right,
Like,
yeah, exactly. So I went into the bathroom and I remember my ex at the time texted me, "Great job." And
oh god.
I was like, oh no, oh no, 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 no. Like all I wanted was for that moment to be private and
Yeah.
for that failure to be something that I could internalize and remember for next time. But it was
Right.
like, that's the worst part about comedy is like, none of your failures are private. They're like, they're witnessed by others because they have to be. So you have to
Yeah.
lose in public.
A lot. Like a lot, like too much, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's funny when you say like it's a big deal at the time, you know, because every show just feels like it's the biggest show, you know?
Yeah.
And when it goes poorly, even if it's just a bar show, did you sort of have the idea that all right, this is just a bar show, no big deal, or were you thinking like, well, that's probably it for me. Like I don't know what I'll do after
No,
this, but it won't be this.
it wasn't that. It wasn't ever, I never said after a bomb, well, I guess that's it, you know?
Mhm.
With the exception of like watching Esty walk out of my Cellar audition in the middle of
Oh
my
my god.
audition, which I ended up getting past. But when I saw her leave, I just assumed it's over, you
Right.
know? And that was like a moment where I was like, well, fuck. Because it was my second time auditioning. So
Yeah.
I was like, it's fucking over, you know? But that, with the exception of that, I've never been bombing and been like, all right, well, this is the last set I'll ever do. Like,
Right, right. Yeah.
which is
I
insane. I should have. I absolutely should have. Like
yeah.
at certain times.
Yeah, I think that I don't know, everything just seems so like heightened in the moment where you're like, I know there's 7 people here and none of them work for any, you know, none of there's no agents or managers here, but it's like you feel like when you do bad in front of them that they're going to tell everybody that they know. You know, like
Yeah.
this is whether it's 70 or 7, like it's like they now know that I'm bad, you know?
Yeah.
And I want to tell them that I'm not. I'd like to wait outside and be like, this is just it's not always like
Yeah.
this, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is, yeah. I think the most relatable thing I ever heard was my husband was on stage opening for someone and he was bombing. And in the middle of it, he just said to the audience, I want you all to know that I'm good at this. And so he gave up on his set, but he was like, just know that I'm good at this. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, I've always like liked his comedy because it's so raw like that. Like it
Yeah.
comes from such a real guttural place where he'll just look at the audience and be like, I'm good, you know?
Yeah. Right.
Um, I don't have access to my emotions like that. I would never come up with something like that to say on stage, but it's
Yeah.
inspiring to hear it because it's so relatable to me.
Because you have to be. Like if you're doing it, obviously you're good at this. And it's like that is that's the purest feeling that you really want to relate to the audience, you know, just
Yeah.
being like you're wrong, you know, I know what
Yeah.
you're thinking and you're wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
I disagree with everything you're
Yes.
giving me. Oh, it's that moment, if you don't mind talking about it. So when you're at the Cellar and you see Esty walk out, you know, do you just sort of phone in the rest of it, or you just say, well, you know, I'm already into this set, I might as well do it the way I can do it best and see what happens.
Yeah, that's what I did. I sort of went um I had this sinking feeling, but then I remind myself constantly and have to in this business that you don't know what the fuck somebody else is thinking. Your
Right.
projection of your own feelings about yourself, no one else is responsible for those except for you. So
Mm-hmm.
like stop assuming that everyone thinks of you what you think of yourself,
Right.
like
Yeah.
and and so I just got through the rest of the set. I just did my closer the way that I uh usually do it and was like, you might not be able to enjoy this right now, but just get through it like a fucking pro and get off the stage and do your time.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I got off the stage and she was like standing there like, give me your avails. But oof, brutal moment in
Yeah.
my past, like I remember her asking me to stop shaking at one point. Like
Yeah.
when I went to hug her, she was like, stop shaking.
Oh
Which
my
of course I
God.
was like, yeah, no problem. Like it's just
Yeah.
made it so much worse.
Oh my God. What a crazy turn. Like, I mean, we can sort of talk about this story because it's a happy ending. It would be
Yeah.
horrible to be like, all right, so I didn't get past and let's dig into it. Like that nobody would want to
Yeah.
hear that. But like to come off stage and think that like, well, whatever, that's it. It's not happening. And her
Yeah.
say, you're in. I mean, that's like flicking a light switch. That's that fast.
Yeah. Yeah. It was and I'm like, not every comic is like dying to perform at the clubs. Like there's plenty of comics who don't really care.
Mhm.
Uh but I was not that comic. Like I was like my if you when I started comedy, if you talked to me about my like top 10 goals, I would have been scared to put the Cellar even on there because that's how much I wanted to get in there.
Mhm.
So, I it was really a crazy turn of events. It's like that's why we do it. We
Right.
just want to get fucking batted around by life on some level.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect example of like the kind of the best and worst of comedy and like why we love it as a lifestyle. Not necessarily as a craft, but as a lifestyle that it'll fucking just throw you around. It's a real roller coaster. It's fun.
Yeah, and you live that like within seconds. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like sometimes you have weeks where it's really good and then really bad, and in a moment it went down to up, which is crazy. That
Yeah.
that's your life.
Well, that's the thing. It all happens within seconds. Like
Yeah.
every time there's like a big win, it happens from one moment to the next. Like
Yeah.
you could just be walking down the street thinking, my God, I don't have a fucking retirement plan. I'm not going to be like, what the fuck am I doing? And then you get a call and somebody's like, hey, are you free to like shoot my show? And it's, you're just from 1 second to the next, you literally, your whole life changes.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
kind of awesome.
It's awesome, but it's also like it's maybe the most insane way to live,
Mhm.
to where you almost have to it's like when people are like, "Hey, what are you doing next week?" And you're like, "I don't know,
Yeah.
and I won't know until Wednesday,
Right.
it's pretty wild. So that moment sort of feeling, this is not going well to end up you get past. That's sort of this big opportunity that goes well. Can you remember sort of any other opportunities where you think like this is it? This is my moment. This is where I'm going to break. It doesn't go well, but it's you realize that time is the great equalizer where it's like, well, I thought that was going to be it for me and it wasn't. Do you have any
Mhm.
sort of those moments?
Not really, because I don't have like thought that was going to be it for me in terms of like thought it was all going to be over or
Well,
that
sort
thought
of
this was
like
going to be it like the next frontier
yeah,
kind of
like I
thing.
think this is maybe when you're presented with the opportunity, you go, well, this is the biggest thing that's come across the desk. And you want it so bad, it doesn't go well. Like I sort of think about like comics that they go, well, I bombed my JFL audition or my first time at Montreal, and I thought that's it. And then, but you're talking to them, and they're people with late night credits, and they're people that are at the Cellar, and they're people with specials, and you're like, it really wasn't. It just took some time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't know that I can think of anything specifically where I was like, I thought I tend to block out disappointments.
Mhm.
Um, like mentally, I sort of tend to just not I just don't I just move past it. Like
Mhm.
if I I feel like if I didn't do that, the other thing would be that I would think about it every day for the rest of my life. Like I would be like
Yeah.
Hemingway and his third wife, you know, just
Right.
like spend the rest of my life trying to destroy that person. So I just don't think about it, you know, like of course, like I've had shows that I've done that haven't gone.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had, I was shooting like and everything that I did that hasn't gone, I've noticed like on some level, I didn't enjoy doing it that much. I wasn't like super into it while I was doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really think of it like that. I feel like the shit that you are supposed to get in this business like comes to you and it's kind of like yours before you don't really have any control over it. So, and it all kind of works out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
I I just sort of maybe that's just a belief that I've adopted, but I feel like everything in my life supports that, but like there's like evidence to support it. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't really question it that much. It's not like a woo woo thing that I do to keep myself in a good place. It's like, oh, look at all the shit that didn't happen. Would you really have wanted it to
Right.
if,
Yeah.
you know, if you could have? Because think about the shit that wouldn't have happened if you had gone through with it. So I don't really think of it like that. And I almost feel like as a comic, you kind of have to adopt that mindset
Mm-hmm.
because what's the like our whole careers are built on fucking up in public in front of people and
Right.
learning from that. So,
Yeah, that's a great point because I think you get to a point maybe you're never comfortable like, bombing, but it's always like you start to get to the point where like, well, it's new stuff. I'm trying something out. You're comfortable with that. But it feels like when you get told no in other facets of this business, it hurts so much. But it's like I'm told no every night, by
yeah.
someone. And
Yeah.
it's just nothing. You go to the next place.
Right.
And that's a great way. I mean, that's probably the healthiest way to look at it is what you're doing, is just because, and I think we all have to believe that because if we didn't believe it was all going to work out, we would have to have gotten out of this a long time ago,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, exactly. I think there's something about um not taking anything. It's not like you take everything in stride or anything
mhm,
like that, but kind of just knowing that like part of doing this and doing it well is like just making use of your mistakes, like
right.
using them to get better.
Hmm. Yeah, right.
I
Yeah.
kind of think it's a cool microcosm of like life in that way.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You're just sort of using what you have at the moment to get you to the next place that gets you to the next, I mean, it really just never ends if you think about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's people that dig into this idea that like, oh, if this isn't working, they don't fucking get me. They're not smart enough. They're not good enough because it's so much easier to do that than it is to be like, I probably need to work on this part of my
Hmm.
act or this
Yeah.
part of myself, you know, like,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
and you see people fall into that, but those aren't people that I necessarily am like building. Um, I'm not like trying to be like them in any way. Like, I
Yeah,
don't want to,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. It's I totally agree with you. We all know the comics that are like, well, this is sort of my art and I'm not going to change. And it's like, well, do you want to perform for people? Like, do you want to perform for a lot of people,
right.
or would you like to just find the 20 people that do get that reference? And,
Yeah.
it's
And
an odd hill to die on.
listen, yeah, I think it's great to have both. I think
Mhm.
it's there's always the truth is always somewhere in between the two extremes, you know? like there's always people that are like, fuck that guy, he thinks he's such an artist, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
like this is how you appeal to like a commercial crowd. And it's like, okay, well, maybe he's not trying to do that. And then, but there's an in between. There's
Yeah,
some,
right.
you know where you're supposed to get better.
Yeah,
And
right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you know the difference between a crowd just not sort of picking up what you're trying to give them and then just a crowd being like that's not funny.
right.
That's there is a noticeable difference. And if you're telling yourself it's the other one, it's not
Yeah,
good. Uh
right.
I feel like um I don't know, now that you're at the Cellar, do you get nervous to have a bad set there, or are you sort of at the point where you're like, "Hey, I'm working on stuff. It happens."
No, I still get nervous to have a bad set there. I hate I was talking to a friend of mine and he was like, you gotta get over like that fear of working things out at the Cellar. You gotta get over that fear. And he's at a point in his career where like it's easier for him to get over that fear than it is for me.
Yeah,
And
right.
I have to put that in my mind too. Like I'm like, okay, but he's got a good point, So I started to work on newer things at the Cellar, but it's always things that I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is going to hit.
Mhm.
Like, it's always something where I'm like, this is a good joke. So if nothing else, even if it doesn't hit, I could probably blame my confidence level, but the joke itself works.
Right.
Um, there's that. I'm constantly battling this fucking desire to like look perfect
Yeah.
and do well every single time and be just this comic that just never misses. It's
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
but I'm 8 years into comedy. Like, why the fuck would I know? Why the fuck would I never miss?
Yeah, right.
Like, who do I think I am? You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's great
There are
to
people that
be,
have been doing this for 20, 30 years that miss.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was
It's
complaining about not knowing what I'm talking about. And I think it was Louis was at the Cellar and I was complaining about it in front of him. And he goes, well, how long have you been doing it? And I was like, 7 years or something like that. And he was like, well, yeah, of course you don't know what you're talking about, And that was like the most humbling thing to hear. And it was really good for me to hear at the time, even though I didn't like love it, but I got what he was saying. And it
yeah,
was like, yeah, why would I? Why would I know that? Why would I know what
right.
I'm talking about 7 years in?
Yeah. It's actually when I can understand like hearing it and being like, "Oh, geez, thanks," but when you really think about it, it's like it's the nicest thing that someone could tell you, which is this is normal. What you're experiencing is normal,
Right.
because what we don't want is to be, and we don't want to have this sort of everyone else has figured this out and I haven't, you
Yeah.
know, and that's
Right.
that's the fear, you
Yeah.
know.
It's if I were to like, if you're getting like the input from other comedians, you're always like battling your own ego because
Hmm.
your ego is going to stop you from hearing anything fucking helpful. It
Right.
will literally step in and be like, you don't need to listen to that. And it's like, no, you do. You need to listen to everything and
Everything, right.
see if it works for you. And he brought up a great point, which was like, if you really love something, you will let yourself suck at it. And that's true of everything in my life.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you have to, like you said it earlier, like you have to be bad at this in front of people to get good, which
Yeah.
is crazy, in itself is like any other job that would be you'd be like, I have to do what? I have to learn how to do accounting in front of all of these people? No, you
Yeah.
know.
I mean, imagine if doctors learned like that. Like,
Right.
I mean, I guess on some level they do, but I we would all feel very unsafe. if doctors
Yes.
were like just
Yeah.
playing like they were like chess. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
right. Yeah. Yeah. If doctors are just doing like, knee replacements at a bar,
Right.
and just for like 7 people just to see if it like works out, you
Yeah.
know.
They're like, we haven't tested this out, but we're going to try and do it with scissors, you know?
Yeah. We're just workshopping,
Just scissors. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Next week we're just gonna be doing it, with bare hands. The week at, we're just
Yeah.
throwing some things around to see what
Yeah.
sticks.
Throwing some shit at the wall.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's nuts. I don't know. It seems like people that don't do stand up, their biggest fear of this is that people sort of are interjecting, the heckling, the interrupting. Do you find that to really be that much of an issue, or is that all just hype because that's all people see, like when they see like hecklers on YouTube and stuff? Do you find that there's a lot of that in stand up, or is that more just that it's made out to be?
I feel like stand-up audiences are getting to be more and more like Broadway theater audiences.
Hmm.
Like they're just getting so, on the one hand, it's great. People know more about comedy now than they ever knew. Feels like our audiences are just they're so like well informed about
Hmm.
the shit that goes on behind the scenes in comedy. And so they're like less and less rowdy. They're more and more respectful. And I kind of miss it. Like
Yeah.
I also feel like as my career's progressed, I'm doing better rooms. So I'm not dealing with hecklers the same way that I was when I was coming up, which was I was doing these like just scam clubs in like Midtown Manhattan
Hmm.
up in Times Square. There was like LOL Comedy Club. I will shout them out by name. They were they would like charge you $8 for like tap water,
Hmm.
like the audience. And so the audience is getting their checks, realizing they've been completely fucking scammed because they were told Chris Rock was coming in. And it's just a
Right.
bunch of fucking open micers, like trying to work shit out. And so I was dealing with hecklers constantly, and the relationship between the comic and the audience was really adversarial from the time that I started up until I started doing better clubs. And so I sometimes I miss it. Sometimes I'm like, oh, it was so fun how crazy it was every night and how like
Yeah.
you never really knew. And I felt this pride in being able to handle those people and being able to handle situations like that, to the point that now when that's a skill that kind of got embedded in me from the very beginning, because I would be doing 4 or 5 shows a night in that club. And so when it happens now, I really is like, I find it to be more of an opportunity than a negative thing. But I totally understand why comics hate it,
Right.
and I I totally get it. I just find it to be one of those things that's really exciting in our careers.
Yeah. Right.
Even when it is obnoxious, it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. I think there are times you're like, ah, man, they really interrupted that, that joke I was working on. But it's also like, it's nice to know I still can handle that.
Yeah,
I don't want to have to pull this out every night. But when you do, boy, it's nice to know you still
like
got it.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like getting hit on after you get married. You know.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're
Or
like,
like when I would walk down the street after I got sobered, somebody offered me Coke. I'd be like, all right. Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
Right.
oh, I'm not going to say yes, but it's kind of nice
Hey,
to know
it's
that you
nice to
think
be
I'm down.
invited. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to be invited. It's so funny, like you talk about audiences being more informed. Like I had someone, it's not a heckle. They're not doing anything wrong, but I do a joke and then like I go to wrap up and like I'm doing my closer and somebody goes, that was a callback. And it's like, a little bit too much. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I don't need you to like, it's like you're kind
Yeah.
of ruining the magic trick for everybody, you
Right.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. They're like pointing out exactly what just happened
Yeah.
and it's such a, the helpful hecklers are the fucking worst.
Right.
They're the
Yeah.
ones that suck the most because they're just like, I don't like a heckler that's like trying to make conversation while you're on stage.
Right.
Those people can really go to hell. But the people that are just being outright disruptive, I have more respect for them because that's what a comedy audience is supposed to feel like.
Yes.
They want
Yes.
to
Right.
fucking like they have some pain they need to release.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you came for the right reasons. You just
Yeah.
got too drunk. That's all.
Right. And when you can whip those people up into a frenzy, they're like, I mean, it's electric, you know? You're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
these maniacs are all on my side right now. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
it's, I guess, yeah, when a crowd is a little bit too, I don't want to say like conservative, but like when they're too well
Polite.
behaved, it's like, oh, geez, like, are you having fun? You know, like,
Yeah. Yeah. They're also they always seem ashamed of themselves or something.
yeah,
Like they'll come out to a comedy show, but then they're not really laughing. They're like smiling at you pleasantly. And I'm like, am I meeting my boyfriend's parents? What is this? You know,
right,
it's like this weird dynamic
yeah.
um, where they're just like appreciating my jokes the way you're supposed to appreciate a painting.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Like they're like staring at it and they're like, we see what you did there. We really respect that. And it's like,
Yeah. I'm like, oh, God,
yeah.
awful.
Yeah. It's almost, it really has, that's a great way to put it, of like a Broadway play where people are sort of staring and taking it in and maybe clapping. But it's like, this is kind of supposed to be a little bit of a party, you know? Like,
Right. Yeah.
you're
I
supposed
start
to
to
have some
question
fun.
those shows make me question myself more than anything else. Like those
Hmm.
shows make me go, "Oh, I got to write like I got to write easier jokes, you know?
Yeah.
I got to write jokes that are like just or just fucking funnier cuz laughter is supposed to be involuntary and
Right.
it really feels like these people are just appreciating a humorous thought. And I'm like, if
Yeah.
that's all I'm writing, I need to work on myself, you know?
Yeah. Are we just, do you think audiences are just sort of desensitized where like they've seen so much comedy, they've seen so much behind the scenes stuff where it's like, I don't know, it like you can't get off to the laughter anymore the same way?
I don't know. I honestly I have no idea. I
Yeah.
feel like we're, you know, there's like probably not, probably not.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's one of those questions that you really only like that only we ask, and we don't really need to bother with it. It's not a
Hmm.
question
Hmm.
that's gonna lead anywhere
Helpful.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Yeah. You
you
don't
know.
get to the end of that and you're like, man, I'm glad I went on that journey. You know?
Right. Yeah. No, I'm glad I followed that line of questioning.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It's
Yeah.
like when I wake up and I'm like, what's wrong with me? You know what I mean? If I
Yeah.
wake up in that mood and I follow that line of questioning, it's
Yeah.
gonna be a fucked day.
That's a long day. Yeah,
Yeah.
that to start the day like that, that's a rough one. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to feel good by lunch, you know,
Right. Yeah.
when you're starting off like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What before we wrap up, I love to know like comics is their sort of their thing after a bad set. So I know you said you like to run to the bathroom or seek shelter. Is there any other sort of like person that you talk to, call, food that you eat, music that you listen to after a bad show that you're just like, I have to do this. This is the only thing that will pull me out of this?
Um, I don't really call anybody because when I'm in that place, I know that anything anybody says is gonna infuriate me.
Mm-hmm.
Like if they say like, "Yeah, you're funny, don't worry about it." Like if I call my husband and he's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it, babe, you're funny." I'm just like, "Ugh." Like I'm like, "Shut up." Like
Right.
you don't fucking mean that. And I'm surrounded by people who are lying to me and I'm nobody's if anything, I'll call somebody that I know is going to say some shit that will piss me off more.
Mm-hmm.
Like anybody that would be like, yeah, I guess you got to work on that whatever. somebody that would offer a solution that I could easily take.
Mm-hmm.
Because the worst part about bombing is the defensiveness that comes up that gets in the way of you being more productive. Like, you defending yourself is always going to be, that's going to be the thing that stops you from being like, okay, what, from a neutral place, where did I go wrong? How do I fix this?
Yeah.
So I just try to like walk away from the club. I try to get the fuck away from the club, from other comics, from anyone that would tempt me to just complain about the audience or the room or the lighting, or the seating pattern. And I just, which is like, that's my favorite, is when people just go, well, the way they're sat, there's no way those jokes would have worked. And it's like, okay. Yeah, I just try to walk in silence, and get as neutral about the experience as possible without completely blocking it out. And I try to ask myself, like, what, I'll listen to the set over, even though that feels like cutting yourself. It's like, you got to do that, just because it really forces you to not, if you you have to listen to the set over, and there's no question about it, you just get sick of beating yourself up.
Yeah.
It's so fucking useless. So I'll listen to the set over. And by the way, this is me on like my best behavior. None of this is me on a regular basis, but best behavior. I would listen to the set, go through it, figure out where I missed and what about it missed, and how can I make this funnier. So that's pretty much it. But most of the time it's like locking myself in a bathroom and just like rocking back and forth like a fucking patient at like an inpatient program.
Yeah. It's so much easier to be like, well, this is what I try to do. This is what I should be doing. But then in the moment, you're like, listen to the set. What are you, crazy? I can't listen to myself. Like, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Yeah. Anything that makes me a better person always is me getting away from my instincts, like me doing the opposite of whatever my instincts are telling me to do. Because, God, I mean, left to my own devices, I really am just a monster.
I think that's why we get into this business, because it's like we have to be so focused on it that we don't have time to sort of be left to our own devices, where it's like we're constantly being stimulated by this and writing and rewriting and trying to get booked, and where it's like, this is the best thing that we can do because it takes us away from ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very personal, but we have to be so focused on all these other things that we don't have time to, like, worry about what's going wrong in our relationships or our lives or our health.
Right.
I'm trying to book Poughkeepsie. You know what I mean? I don't have time to worry about this.
You can come to your fucking baby shower.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Are you crazy? I'm losing money to play in the Poconos.
I know.
Like, I can't come to your wedding.
I know. Oh my God. Jesus, it's so relatable.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Please tell people where to, of course. Tell people where to hear you, where they can find you, where they can see you.
Okay. I have a podcast called Find Your Beach with my husband, Andy Haynes, who's also a comic. Jesus, he just released The Hounds. And I also, can you get the door, babe? Sorry. Pure chaos at the end of the podcast.
Perfect.
You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Rosebud Baker, and I have tour dates coming up on my website, rosebudbaker.com.
Right on. Well, thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.